Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I am so excited to have you here. If you are somebody who is listening in for the first time, hello and welcome to the Ambitious family. And also, if you're someone who listens in every week and you know who you are, I want to say a massive thank you. I have had so many of you reach out to me and send me messages of takeaways that have landed for you in these episodes and things that you've acted on in your business, in your life. And the one thing I know is that if you are someone listening to this podcast, the reason I called it ambitious is because there's women like you who are going for big, big things in your life. You're looking to achieve massive things in your business. You want to achieve massive things in your health, in your relationships, in everything. And my hope is with every single episode that I record to bring you a structure, a strategy, advice, an aha moment, if you will, that allows you to walk away from the episode feeling like you have more tools in your toolbox than before you press play. And today is another tool that I want to add. And this is specifically for one very specific type of woman. And this is something that I think will be beneficial for you because if you are someone who either is in the process of maybe going through a breakup with a relationship, maybe you've recently gone through a divorce, or maybe you have a friend or a family member who's currently navigating this, I want to encourage you to send them this episode because today is really going to be the advice that I would give and all of the learnings that I've had of my own breakup, which I'm going to expand in a second, and really all the things that I learned along the way as someone who is managing a very decent sized business and also has most of her life on social media. And so today we're going to just cover it all. And I can't guarantee to you that I'm not going to cry during today's episode because, needless to say, a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is still very raw for me. But I will be honest, I really wish that I had an episode like this when I was going through what I was, because it would have been something that would have given me some light at the end of the tunnel to know how things are going to unfold, what is normal for me to experience, what's not normal, what do I do about the business, how do I handle my clients, what do I post on social media, how do I even show up right now? And we're going to dive into all of those things. So, I want to just say that if you are someone maybe who's thinking to yourself, well, I'm in a happy relationship right now, and I'm not in the process of going through a breakup or getting divorced, that's okay. There may even be takeaways from today that also are just going to land for you because really the basis of what I'm going to talk about today is how to navigate your business when you're not really in a place of navigating your business or life. And like, how do you manage when you feel like you've got nothing in the tank, when you feel like mentally you're not at the place that you hoped you would be or that you desire to be? And how do you still show up? How do you continue to grow the business? How do you continue to serve clients? How do we navigate marketing? All of those things are still going to be applicable to you, regardless of whether you're someone going through a breakup or through a divorce right now. And so, I kind of want to share a little inspiration, obviously, for this episode because I am a pretty private person. I don't really, up until now, I've been in online world and, a business owner for several years now. And I've never really been the kind to like, quote unquote, air my dirty laundry on the internet. It's never really been my style. And again, there's nothing wrong with it. I just think for me, I've always preferred to be a private person. But I'll be honest, some of the reason that I want to share this is, as I said, it would have really helped me. But this year, it's really interesting because as I was navigating this, I also had people in my world. It felt like everyone was going through this. And there was people who were being broken up with and it was kind of blindsiding them. There was people navigating wanting to end their relationships that I was coaching in business. And I also was like myself as a business consultant helping people to literally navigate how to show up in their business, support their team and clients while navigating really messy divorces. And for me, I'll be honest, at first when all these came to me and I started to have so many people in my surroundings for me, at first it was a trigger because I thought, who am I to help someone with this when I'm literally going through it myself? But then I started to rethink, okay, I am the person to help someone with this because I'm going through it myself and I can pass along things that are helping and not helping. And so, one of the mottos that I have a lot of the time for myself in business and frankly in life is to always speak from scars, not wounds. And, obviously, we're several months down the pipeline from my breakup, and that was in 2024. And I, in the moment, didn't desire, and didn't feel comfortable talking about any of this or even making it publicly known on social media, because I, for myself, thought it was kind of going to open the floodgates of inquiries and questions and all of these things. But I feel like now I can actually, because I'm not as in the deep thick of the emotion, can kind of see it a little bit more clear. And the thing I also want to say with that though is the emotions are not gone. Transparently, I had really sad nightmares last night about my previous partner, and still to this day am processing it. I think about him almost every single day. Like there's so much of that that's still ingrained in me, in my life, in my mind, in my heart. And that's not something that is necessarily going to go away overnight. And so, what I recognize is that it's important for us to also normalize that while you might not be in the thick of this anymore, the effects of it or the impact of it may still be there, which is why I want to talk about some of the things that I not only did in the eye of the storm, if you will, but also now have still maintained as things that are helping me to process. Because the thing that we know with a divorce or a breakup is you're grieving. You're literally mourning somebody who's still alive. You're mourning someone who is still here. And it's a very confusing and overwhelming thing because for me, the thing that I really was mourning was the individual, but I was also mourning the death of the dream of what I thought my life was going to be. And so the mourning process, still months and months later, is still here. It just feels and looks different. And so the intention of today is we're going to break down some of the things that I feel were helpful for me, supported me in these times, and also might be a support for you. So I want you to kind of go in today with an open mind. Go in with the desire to look at how can I operate differently and how can I maybe operate my business differently when I'm in these really peak periods of stress and protect myself so that I can function to the, ideal productivity that I have within me in these moments, okay? So, for context for what I'm going to talk through today, several months ago, at least 6+ months ago, I ended a relationship with someone that I had been with for 8 years and that I was actually engaged to. And the reasons that I did that are not something I'm going to discuss today because, frankly, that's something that's really personal to me. And I very much respect him as a person and as one of my previous partners. And so, because of that, it's not something I'm going to get into. But what I will say is, as to my point of the death of the dream, and especially obviously being engaged and all of these things, what I will say is, I never thought that this was something that I was ever going to do. This was never obviously being together 8 years, saying yes to getting married. This was never something that was part of a plan. And so for me, it's actually, I'll be honest, something that I have a lot of guilt about because I feel like sometimes when you're the one broken up with, everyone's like, "Oh, you have a right to feel sad, you have a right to mourn." But I think there's this belief that when you're the person who initiates it, that you're not allowed to be sad or you're not allowed to mourn because you created the problem. And, for me, the breakup caused the breakup caused a lot of that guilt in me and a lot of shame in me and a lot of, frankly, me having to handle the fact that a lot of people probably do not like me very much on his side of the equation. And understandably so, because of, causing pain to somebody or causing hurt to somebody. But if I could go into it without going into details, the basis of this time for me was me choosing myself. And, people often ask me, was there something that happened? Was there like an event that happened? And honestly, no. I think when you get engaged and when you are in that season of your life, you start to look at your life very seriously. And I had gone and just by fluke at that time had gone and done this kind of like intensive experience for myself for business. Actually, it was the reason that I had gone. But long story short, it had led me to having a lot of alone time with myself and really getting out of my, typical environment, getting out of my, typical day to day of what things looked like. And it was in doing that that I realized that just I didn't feel like this was how I necessarily wanted to be loved for the rest of my life. And so he, I will say, is a great person. And he is not somebody that I'm going to say a bad thing about because this was really me choosing myself. It wasn't me not choosing him. And I think that that was hard for me because then when I was having and grieving and mourning and all these things and feeling such a intense emotion, I almost felt shame for even feeling that because I thought, well, who are you to be upset when you literally caused this problem? And it's something that I'm still working through, if I'm going to be honest with you, because I will always have love for him. But I think what I will say as if you're listening to this episode is I think in my opinion, leaving a relationship when there hasn't been, cheating or there hasn't been any of these things is actually harder because I've said to people in my world, like, it would have been easier if some big thing had happened. It would have been simpler if there was this like big event that occurred. And because of that, that's the reason that it happened. And I know that's everyone's curiosity is like, what happened? And the only thing I can really distill it down to is the fact that, like, I had to choose myself, and I had to know that the way that I wanted to be loved was not too much to ask, and that it was okay to choose you and make that not about the fact that you're not choosing someone else. And that's kind of how, I ended up where I am today, which is on my own and living alone and starting over at 32. And, you know, I want to share this because I feel like I needed this. I think I was, it's going to be a hard one, guys. Bear with me. I think I was so deeply desiring to have this like family unit and this future. I so even to this day, like I want nothing more to be than to be married and have kids and all those things. And so I think I wanted the dream so bad, like so bad, that I almost didn't allow myself to consider that it wasn't going to happen in the timeline that it was. I so deeply wanted children and I so deeply wanted to be married and I wanted this specific life for myself. Like I want nothing more than to like be a mom and all of those things. And I think that this process basically showed me that there's one thing to have this dream, but then there's to say, okay, but like, are you other than the dream, once it's all done, how about that? And so what does that look like? Once you have the kids, once you get married, what does that look like? And I yeah, I just want to say if you're listening to this and you feel like, but this was supposed to be my person and like, but this was supposed to happen in this way. And like, I remember one of the first things that I said to a friend of mine when I had decided to leave was like, I feel like I'm going to ruin my own life. Like I'm going to end up single forever and I'm not going to end up having the things that I want for my life. And it's all because of me. Like I'm the problem because I hurt him. I hurt myself. I hurt all of it. And I think the thing that I would want more than anything for you to take away from today is that sometimes it's not just about having the vision, but also looking at, okay, well, this vision is built of a bunch of pieces. Do you like the pieces as much as you like the picture? And once I started to ask myself those questions, that's really where I started to get some clarity. And so I don't want today to be about my story. I want today to be about helping you and to be a place where I can share the things that really helped me. And so, all of that to say, let's get into it. So, let's get into it, ladies. Okay. So, first, you want to acknowledge your emotional state. One of the things that I think was a big a big thing for me was I had initially not really acknowledged what was happening. Like I was trying to move out of my old house and I was trying to obviously navigate communicating in that past dynamic with him and trying to make coordinations and cancel my wedding and all of those things while still running a business. And I basically was like, okay, like hop into ClickUp, hop into my email, hop into creating content. And I didn't give myself nearly enough acknowledgement of what was going on because I was just kind of like, okay, like push through, keep working, keep going. And the problem with that being is that your lack of acknowledgement of what is going on is ultimately not, as a result, allowing you to actually feel. And so, because of that, you're not actually going to process anything, which means all of your emotion is just sitting at the surface and waiting to come out. And so you're not in lack of acknowledging how you're actually doing right now and the reality of what you're experiencing, people get very frustrated with themselves. You might find that you're trying to go and do the same old tasks and sending an email or putting up a piece of Instagram content is taking you 4 times as long as it used to and you're like, "What the heck?" Hello, you are not at the same capacity you were before this, let's call it what it is, trauma happened. You're just not. You're not at the same place where you were before this has occurred. And so I think the important thing is to acknowledge like you're not going to perform at the level that you once did in your business during a time where you are processing heavy emotions and trauma and changes in your life. And the faster that you acknowledge that, the faster that you're going to be able to get a new normal and get a new rhythm. You have to give yourself some compassion and some consideration for all of what you're navigating and processing. And so I really tried to set really realistic goals. I very much peeled my business back to like the only necessary needle movers and absolutely nothing else. Like I wasn't taking on any new projects. I wasn't, looking to build anything new. I wasn't in creation. I was just like, how do we keep the lights on? And what is the absolute bare minimum that I need to do in order to be able to achieve that? This was not a time for launching a new offer. This was not a time for putting out a new marketing campaign. Like this was genuinely mission, keep the lights on. That's what the approach was for business at that time. And for me, I just had to make peace with the fact that everything else could wait. Like I wasn't in a place where I could be building right now because frankly, I had barely any capacity to just show up day to day, let alone think about development for the future. And so with all of these emotions, as I said, that are coming up, I think it was also looking at blocking out space to feel. Like, I'll be honest, at the beginning, because again, of lack of acknowledgement on my part, I would literally go on to calls with clients and I would be like on the verge of crying at 80% of the call. And it happened with like 4 calls. And I remember after those 4 calls, I thought, okay, well, I can't do this because like this is not going to work. How am I supposed to show up with these clients when I'm basically wanting to cry on every single one and they don't know what's going on? And so what I started to do is made my processing like a built-in regimen for myself because what I recognized was that if I didn't process, if it's coming up, it's coming out. And so I could either allow it to come up and come out whenever it decided to, or I could create space in the morning, in the midday, in the evening to allow that to happen. And I'll be really honest, this is what I did. Every day I woke up and I drove to a coffee shop, and on that drive was about 10 minutes, I would blast the saddest music, and I would just basically to me, that was a sucker punch to the gut, and I would just start crying because I was like, "If I don't get this out of my system, I cannot get on these calls because I will just be on the verge of crying the entire time." I would journal every night, and again, for me, for some reason, playing music always brought up my emotions for me, so I would journal with playing music in the background and I would just write and write and write for hours because it was the only thing that would actually get the emotions out of my body and the thoughts out of my brain. And I just kept going and going and going until it felt complete. And I'm going to be honest, sometimes I wrote about the situation that was happening for 3 hours in the evening. And I'm sharing this because I had this practice to get the coffee in the morning. I had this journaling at night. I oftentimes would go for a walk in the middle of the day and just like go do something to pattern interrupt myself in between calls, because something that got shared with me by a mentor was all of us have a cup. Okay. So think about a coffee cup. And this coffee cup is something that is basically your threshold. And so you can have a little bit of coffee that comes in from the stress of the day, right? You might have the client stress, you might have health stress, you might have, stress from anything in your life, right? It could be even if you're a parent picking your kids up from school, whatever it may be. And you're adding all these stresses of your day. And before you know it, the cup is filling up and up and up and up, right? And then when you have something like this happen, you're literally dumping coffee in this cup in addition to everything else that's already in there. So this cup is filling up at a rapid rate, which means when you have additional overflow being poured into this cup, you got to empty it. And the only way to empty it is to actually take time out to process. And what this coach shared with me, and thank you, Xander, when this coach had shared this with me, there's two ways to do this. There's the small elements of relief, which are going to be something like, taking a bath or going for a walk or getting a coffee, right? They're the things that kind of almost in a way reset your system, like they kind of reset your nervous system. But that's very different. That takes a little spoonful. It takes a teaspoon of coffee out of your cup. If you want to empty that cup completely, you have to go to the depths of your emotion and the depths of what you're feeling to be able to get that out and start from zero. And so what I realized was this cup was getting filled. Like the pour was nonstop and just ever flowing. And it became my responsibility to clear space for that to happen because it wasn't going to stop anytime soon. And obviously over time, does the flow get less and less and it fills up slower and slower? Yes. But in the midst of it, i.e., truthfully, for the first like 5 months, I had to really look at putting this as part of the practice of my day. And I would seek to cry. And I know that's going to sound so weird, but I would seek to process because I'm like, the only way to get through this is to go through it. And I remember, another coach said to me, you can't go over it, you can't go under it, and you can't go around it. The only way to navigate this is to go through it. And your avoidance of wanting to feel and wanting to acknowledge and wanting to talk about it and wanting to cry, for example, is the reason it's staying around so long. It needs you to go through it. And every moment you avoid it means that you're going to prolong how long you have it and how long it's in you. So, for me, what I recognized was that my emotions needed space to happen. And if I didn't have them happen when I decided, they were happening during business hours. And so I would recommend that you really take space and say, where can I block out things to navigate the stress? And again, maybe you're not going through a breakup or through a divorce, but you might be going through something that's just a personal stress in your life right now. That's still a practice that you can integrate. You can still have the practice of saying, I want to process my emotions in the morning by doing X, at lunch by doing this, in the evening by doing such and such. And find things that work. It could be a bath, as I said, for one of those kind of surface level reliefs. It could be therapy that you have pre scheduled biweekly. It could be reading. It could be a journal. It could be sad music and crying. It could be a smash room. It could be whatever you want to do, but find something that can be a release for you. Now, the other thing I want to say is social media. Obviously, as we talked about, I have built my business on social media, which has been a beautiful gift to me, and I'm very grateful for it. But it also, in this time, was a very added thing that I had to navigate because I didn't know what to do. I was like, no one knows about this. When it first happened, I didn't tell anybody. Like I told, the initial closest 5 friends to me. But other than that, I didn't tell anybody that this has happened. My clients didn't know. My team didn't know. Social media didn't know. And I really struggled because I'm like, should I post something about this to say I'm not going to post the way that I've always been, or that, I felt like very inauthentic because I thought, how am I going to show up? Because it seems like I'm being a fraud. And I just really had to realize I don't owe anyone an answer. I don't owe anybody an update. I don't owe anybody the details. I don't owe anybody anything. I really just wanted to continue to show up. And all I said to my audience was, I'm navigating something difficult right now. And because of that, in my personal life, here's what I would say. And I made an awareness that I was going through something, but I didn't say anything as to the details of what it was and asked people to respect my space. And so I think for me as a business owner, the thing I'd recommend to you is realizing that you don't need to share everything with your audience and that you as a brand get to determine how personal your brand is. Like, I know people who basically have nothing off the table. I know people who will post anything and everything. That's fine, but that just wasn't my brand until now. And so I thought also by sharing something on social media, I was just going to welcome more attention, more questions, and I didn't want to deal with it. But it also became this like looming pressure in me because I had people DMing me saying, "Hey, where's your ring?" or "Hey, how's the wedding planning going?" or "Are you going to share more wedding content?" or like, "Are you ever going to share, your dress and stuff after the wedding?" Like, I had so many people messaging me in things in context to the wedding, and it just became really overwhelming. But what I gave myself the permission of is like, I get to keep my brand going, my social media going, because frankly, that's my business. Like, that's where I generate my income to pay for my life. So that wasn't a opportunity for me that I had the ability to just decide to turn off. But what I did get to decide to do is how much I shared on my page about details or about my personal life. And so I really focused on making it about business. I started focusing heavier on strategy, focusing heavier on just the things that I helped people with, talking about clients, talking about results, talking about things that to me were just not in the personal bucket because that was a way for me to show up every day, to provide value, and to not feel just because I'm going through this that I have to talk about it. Because who says? Who says I owe someone an answer? Who says that I have to talk about it? Who says that someone, because they follow me, is allowed to have the details and the nitty gritty of my life? Says who? So to me, I showed up and just talked about business. And in that, I'm going to be honest, I felt shame in doing that because, my family and his family and my friends and his friends are probably thinking, she's going through all of this and she's showing up and talking about strategy. But guess what? I did what I had to do to, number one, continue my business going. And number two, to distract myself from what was happening. Because the idea of just pausing my entire business because something was happening in my life was not something that I was at a place that I wanted to do. And that, frankly, many people can do. Many business owners, like yourself, even may not be at a place where you can pause your business and say, hey, I'm just not going to sell and I'm just not going to market and I'm not going to serve clients for the next 5 months while I process this. I tell clients even now, one of the things that I think actually makes the most powerful entrepreneur is those that experience adversity while having to grow their business. Because truthfully, for me, this process, while extremely painful and difficult, was something that gave me an understanding of how to navigate running a business when I felt like I was just struggling. Like, how do I still keep what I have as the promises to myself and continue those going when I feel like I've got nothing in the tank? And this allowed me to see the power I have within me, that I can process emotions, that I can show up in the business, that I can decide what I share, that I can rewrite this idea of what it means to be personal with your audience. Like, all of that became something that became super, super clear. And so I also want to say that in the aspect of sharing or not sharing on social media, also then came up the topic, okay, well, if social media doesn't know, I've decided that. But then the question becomes, if no one knows, that became a lot of pressure for me because I am very close with my clients. Many of them have worked with me for a very long time, minimum 6 months, some of them up to 4 years. And in that, I became very uncomfortable initially around my team. And I became very uncomfortable around my clients because I felt like there was this big elephant in the room that if I didn't share with them, I was being inauthentic and I couldn't actually do my job because there was this wall, this like gap between us that I knew was there, but they didn't know was there. And the thing I will say is any good team member or any connected client is going to be able to feel that your energy is off. either that you're distracted, that you're not showing up the way that you have always done it. They're going to notice you're slower to respond in messages, that something's going on with you. And what I knew is that I had to tell my team, number 1. And again, I didn't go into the details of every single thing with my team, but I just said, like, here's basically what's happened. And I really need your support over the next little bit to basically have an all hands on deck. I'm not functioning at the way that I've always functioned. Again, capacity is less than it's been. I am going to have moments where I'm emotional or things are raw, and we're just going to keep plugging along. But like, this is where we're at. And I would really love your support with this. And honestly, that even telling them felt like such a weight off to me, because I felt like the transparency meant that I could really be honest about how I was feeling and what I was navigating, and not feeling like I had to put on like this mask or like this brave face for my team. Because truthfully, it has created deeper connections with my team members. It's created, more open conversations about their relationships and how they feel about things, and, experiences that they've gone through. And like, it's bonded us in a beautiful way. And so I'm really grateful that I did open up. And then came the next stage, which was my clients. And I will be honest, I was like, I'm not telling my clients, because originally I thought it's not professional. I don't need to tell them. I don't want them to think I can't do my job, like all these things. And I thought, well, what kind of freaking leader are you? What kind of leader are you to go in and say, "Oh, well, like, I'm just going to have this massive life altering event that completely rewrites the entire path of my life, but I'm not going to acknowledge it because business as usual." Like, what kind of mentor, coach, leader am I to embody that as my values or what I do when things are difficult? That's not the example I want to set for people. So I was very uncomfortable, but I created and crafted a short message to my clients at that time. And I said, listen, I want to let you guys know that I am no longer engaged, and I'm navigating a basically separation from my long term partner, and that I, may be a little bit slower to respond in the next, call it 2 weeks, in the immediate, as I navigate making some decisions and life changes. I still will be doing our calls. I still will be, showing up in the container as we always have. I don't particularly want to talk about the details, but I just wanted to acknowledge it, because you may feel like my energy isn't what it typically is, or if you feel that I get emotional at a moment, I want you to know that I am fine, and I'm going to be fine, and that I just love you guys to pieces. And because of that, I want you to just know that this is something that if I need to step away for a second, or if I need to just take a breather for a second, that's why. When I tell you that when I sent that message, I wanted to poop my pants, because I'm like, people are going to fire me. People are going to think, oh, great, she can't do her job and all these things. I could not have been more wrong. I couldn't have been more wrong. I messaged my clients, and I instantly got private messages from people who said, "Hey, I actually did the same thing," or "Hey, I went through a divorce with a business, and here's some things that helped me. Here's a book that I read that I loved. We love you, we support you." And it brought me to tears, because as I said, I had a lot of shame about, how things had unfolded, and I have a lot of guilt that I'm still working through. But seeing myself surrounded by all these incredible, powerful women who acknowledged me and understood where I was coming from, and supported me and allowed me space and said, "Hey, you want to cancel the call? Cancel the call. You want to answer my messages for 3 weeks? Don't answer them." Like, obviously I didn't do that, but just knowing that there was such a deep level of understanding and grace that was being extended to me really helped me to be able to show up authentically, because I honestly I'm so grateful, and I would never take it back. I would do it again tomorrow if the same thing happened, because telling those clients changed the way that I was allowed or able to show up in my business. And so I really think that there's an ability to be transparent without oversharing. Like, I am someone who believes in transparency, but I sometimes have always struggled with it, to say, like, how do I tell them without giving the details? And I think that there is a way to tell them. It's just to say what happened. It's to say that this is what I'm navigating, and I don't want to go into why and how and when and all of those things, but I just need you to know that this is how it may impact you. And that's what I want to give to you as advice is if you're trying to let your team know, let them know, hey, I'm not going to potentially be as responsive, so I might take a little longer to get back in Slack. Or, hey, I'm not going to be able to navigate my email. Does anyone mind helping me to be able to manage those messages? Or if you have a deadline for something, I might be a little bit behind when it comes to, marketing or recording or whatever it might be. And it's okay to share that you're going through something like this, because I think the aspect of like being professional was something that I really had to unpack, because I thought, is professional really the difference of not experiencing anything personal? No. Someone is a professional when they acknowledge the personal. They go through the personal things. They experience all of the ups and the downs and the resistances, and even in spite of that continue to acknowledge it while also taking action in their business. To me, someone that is admirable in business and somebody that I would look up to is someone who's not pretending that they don't have pain, but having pain, managing it, and continuing to persist within whatever that is that their pursuit is. And that's what I had to decide for myself, is that I'm going through something, and I'm not professional because I'm not going through this. I'm a freaking professional because I am going through this. I'm acknowledging it and I'm showing the fuck up anyways. Like, cause that's to me what a leader is. Leaders don't not fall. They fall, acknowledge they fell, they get up, and they continue to move. And I had to really rewrite this idea of like professional is perfection without ever having pain or resistance or difficulty or problems or any of those things. And it honestly gave me such a deeper respect for other people in the professional setting of like who I deem to be professional. And some people you may think, or someone in your world may say to you, well, it's not professional to share those things. Well, I would actually argue differently. I was in that camp. I used to be that person who's like, you don't share personal things, you don't tell people this. But I'll be honest with you, when you do, you will be shocked at the connections that you create. Because guess what? The people you feel closest to are not the people that you have surface level conversations with. They're not the people that talk about the weather and talk about the day to day. They're when you really get into the mud of life. Like you guys talk about the deep real issues in life, and that's what makes you feel connected. You really see each other when you talk about honest, authentic, deep, real conversations. And that's what happened. I have never been closer with my clients than I am today. I honestly would say I've never been closer with my team than I am today. Like this brought a level of removing that block between us and literally physically bringing us closer. And so with your team, I just want to kind of put a bow on that, because you also need to also be able to communicate that you need support. Like I would try to plug along, and I really during that time, which has actually served me in delegation since then, I had to learn to really ask for help and say, hey, do you feel like you have capacity to potentially take on ABC? Hey, do you think that you might be able to manage this for me? Is there any chance that you could help or assist me with executing blank? Like, really saying, not just because you could do it, because I used to do all of those things and I had projects on my plate and I had tasks that I did. But in that time, as I said, my capacity was so low that I really did need support. And so the question becomes, can you ask people, and have you asked people in your world to say, hey, can you help me? And also, by the way, this doesn't have to be necessarily even in the professional bucket. I had to ask for a lot of my help so that I could focus on professional in my personal bucket. I had to get people to help me with getting my dogs out for a walk. I had to get people to help me with packing. I had to get people to help me with the personal stuff, because if I had to do that in addition to working, there was just no way I was going to be able to do it. Like I had zero battery to do it. And frankly, there were so many people in my corner who helped me with that, that it was the reason I was able to continue on. So that's another thing I want to share, is the aspect of doing it alone. I think so many of us, especially, you know, Us ambitious women. Us ambitious women are really this whole like, I can do it, I can do it. And listen, it's not that you can't do it alone, okay? But you also don't get a medal for doing it alone. And one thing I want to say is you doing it alone is a choice because you don't need to. And I want to share something that came up for me with this situation. I felt like such a burden to people. I would see people who were having the highest moments of their life. My brother is getting married this year, and my one of my best friends is getting married this year. And I was having all these people who were having like just the most joyous moments of their life. And I felt like a dark cloud. And truthfully, my mode of operating was to completely isolate. It was like, don't answer your text messages, you know, stay basically alone by myself in my room. I tried to also distract myself by traveling. I would do anything to basically just flee from people and push people as far away from me as possible in the belief, or when I did that, it was with the belief that I didn't want to burden people. I didn't want to have people have to support me and basically be in it with me because I knew how dark it felt to process that mourning and grief. And I didn't want to bring other people into my world. But the thing that was really interesting, I had some conversations with friends, and it was ones I had decided to open up. And they said, hey, next time, instead of saying that you feel like a burden or like you don't want to like bother people or any of that, how about you ask us next time? How about you ask me if I have capacity to support you right now? Because it would be something that would be helpful. How about instead of you making decisions for me, you actually ask me if I have the ability or if I'm okay to be able to support you in XYZ? Can I do a phone call? Can I do a FaceTime? Can we, go and connect for dinner? Can we do these things? If you feel like you're really a burden, ask people around you and say, hey, this is what I'm navigating. Do you think you could support me by connecting tonight for dinner? Because for me, I really had this belief that I thought if I was talking about it to people, they were going to be like, oh, Kate, like, this is so heavy. That's what I felt. And since talking through with people now, they're like, hey, this is friendship. This is what this is. It's in these moments that you find out who the people are that are there to support you, thick and thin, high and low. Like, those are the people who want to be in it with you because that's what friendship is. And so I really realized that I needed a support system, and I needed my top 5 or my top 6 people to be able to contact to help me in it. And I also really needed neutral people. That's something I want to say to you. Your friends and family are people who they want to support you and they want to help you, but let's be honest, they've all got a narrative, right? Like, his side of the table is going to say, we're on your side and your partner's to blame. Everyone on my side is going to say, hey, we're on your side and your partner's to blame, right? Everyone's always going to have an emotional invested interest in whatever side or party they're connected to. That's normal. That's how a lot of friendships and dynamics work. You support each other. But the thing that I think is also very important is to have a neutral support. And ideally, a therapist, a consultant, somebody that you're working with that doesn't know your situation, doesn't know your family, doesn't know your friends. And I think this is important, not just like you want to have your circle of people, but you also need that neutral person because that neutral person is going to be honest with you. And I found that I didn't want to get a lot of advice from friends because I was like, you are just saying this to like make me feel better, or you're just saying this because, you're trying to just be on my side. But I actually don't want that. I want someone to say, hey, here's what I would tell you because I don't know either party very well. This is just the general advice of what I would tell you based on the situation. And so therapy was huge for me because I needed to have people who were in my corner who are actually neutral and willing to give me the tough love and willing to just say things for what they are and not always in my mind kind of wondering, is that the right advice? Or are they just saying that to make me feel better or just to support me and be behind me? And so you really need friends and you need that circle around you that you can trust, that you can lean on, that will also be an aspect of accountability because I also needed people checking in on me. And I have just the most amazing friends in the entire world because I had people checking in saying, "Hey, where are you at? Like, what are you doing this weekend? What are you up to?" Like, constantly checking in to make sure that I was okay. Because if I didn't, I would literally, I talk about it now, it was like a black hole. Like, I just tuned the entire world out, opened my laptop, put my headphones on, and it was only when they would kind of check in that I would kind of pop my head out and actually have to acknowledge where I was and what I was going through. Now, the other thing I want to say is self care. Now, I know when I say those two words, you're like, yeah, yeah, self care, like understood, take a bath. And listen, your body is physically grieving right now. And if someone had died, you would be taking care of yourself and allowing your space to be able to process. And you would be trying to pour into yourself to support you as much as possible. That's no different whether it's a breakup or a divorce, or if someone has died who, was here and is now no longer here. As I said, to me, divorce and breakups are just really the death of the dream of what you thought your life was going to be. And unfortunately, you're grieving and mourning a person who still is alive. And so self care is so important. I will say initially I was not sleeping. Like I was not sleeping, which made it 10 times more difficult to show up in business. It made it me way more emotional and raw because I wasn't able to sleep. So I really, really focused on sleep. I really started to focus on food and making sure that if my mental health was already taking a beating, I'm not going to make it worse by filling up my body with garbage in the sense of food that's going to make my gut worse, which ultimately gut brain connection makes your brain worse. Like food affects your mental health. I also try to be really aware of my space and trying to see, okay, well, what could I do in my environment to try to make those things that could help me? Self care doesn't have to be a bath. It could be. I took boatloads of baths during this time, but it could be a bath. It could be a walk. It could be meditating. I loved going to do saunas and ice baths. That was one of the things that I found really helpful. And I would just go by myself and literally just go to a sauna and ice bath and just hang out there for 90 minutes and do the circuit back and forth. And that was something that really, really helped me. So the self-care you time also doesn't need to be like a day or an afternoon. Like it's just practices that you build into your day, but they make a difference because here's the thing I want to say. Prioritizing self-care also is important because social media is not where you need to be when you're navigating a divorce or breakup. You should not be, if you do not fill your time with things that help you, you will fill your time with things that do not serve you. You will fill your time with scrolling on their social media, seeing if they posted, checking out their story. You will be, for those going through a breakup, you will be scrolling old text messages of things that you guys said to each other back and forth, trying to unpack where did this happen or what did that mean. You will be going through your old photos on your phone and going through old pictures together and old videos together. And you'll be scrolling on Facebook and looking at your pictures and videos together, and you will be in the memory of them. And it's not to say that we're looking to remove the memory of them, but we're looking to really just also make sure that we're filling our space with things that help us. And for me, the reason I'm able to list all those things off is because all of those are things I did. Those were all things that I did. I was thinking about it all day, every day. Like all day, every day, I was thinking about it. And if I didn't fill my time with something that was filling it with serving me and supporting me and helping me to process, I was going to end up on my phone, either distracting with business or diving into all of our archives together. And so I really recommend giving yourself almost like a menu. That's what I did with one of my clients who navigated a divorce this year. I said, I want you to make a menu of self care. And what I want you to do is, I want you to have your morning, midday, and evening routine. And I want you to pick two things from this menu. And they're things that you enjoy. Maybe it's watching Yellowstone. Maybe it's ice bath. Maybe it's going for a walk. Maybe it's a bath, whatever it is. but it's your menu. It's not going to be the same as mine. It's not going to be the same as the next person's. It's yours. And so I want you to think about things that you can do for 10 to 15 minutes that you can put on this list that you can go through and pick as things to fill your bucket to keep you from going into things that do not serve you, such as doom scrolling on your phone and communication and all of those things. I also think that there's an aspect because of, again, going through the pictures, going through all of this, that is also the hardest part is you have to let go. At some point, you got to let go. And the only way to let go is to let go of the vision of what you thought your life was going to be with this person. And I was for months stuck in, but I was supposed to be married, but I was supposed to have kids. That was the plan this year, but I was supposed to this, but I was supposed to that. And I realized that I was so deep in what was supposed to happen and all of our past that when I thought about moving forward, there was no vision. There's no purpose. I felt no purpose because all of what I had known to be my purpose was gone. And the thing I want to say is you have to reevaluate what you want. And it's going to take time. It's not going to happen the week after. This is going to be months down the road, probably. But after having months of going through our pictures together and months of, say text messages and trying to put together all the pieces and understand it all, what I realized was like, that was me living in a chapter because I refused to continue writing the next one. And it was an avoidance, frankly. And I realized it was a choice. And the reason I say it's going to take time is because it's a choice, you're not always ready to move on. Like there was a time where, truthfully, I struggled to think about the vision because I had never even considered a vision without him in it. And I didn't want to think about my new life and business and all those things because that by acknowledging a different future meant I was acknowledging that we were done. And that's why I say it's going to take some time because again, I think that the motto of the death of the dream was something that helped because I realized that I had to grieve. It's kind of like almost thinking about, people who have their partner die and they have to grieve before they can date again. Like it's the same thing. You have to allow yourself space to let the pieces fall where they may before you may be able to move on mentally, emotionally, all of it. And what I want to say is you can look at it as sad because it is sad, for some, depending on the situation, it is sad to feel like, you've got to put this new vision together. But what I had to do was realize that I could feel shame, I could feel guilt, I could feel all those things. Or I could decide that I had a fresh slate. I had people in my circle who said, try to look at this as a fresh slate in your world. And I was like, shut up. Like, I was like, I don't feel that. Okay. I don't want a freaking fresh slate. Like it wasn't something I was excited about. I wasn't ready to hear it. But when I did get ready to hear it and I did get to a place where I could handle that, I started to realize like as women, choosing ourselves isn't necessarily easy, and it's not something that's always going to be a pat on the back or that other people will acknowledge. But what I can say is that you deserve the vision that you want for your life. You deserve to have everything that you've ever wanted. And you get to build a new a new book, right? Like that book is closed. And I had someone in my circle say to me, Kate, you're trying to continue to write chapters in an old book instead of, starting a new one. And if you just keep writing in that, you're staying in that story. That story is done. That story is finished. That ending is already complete. This is a moment for you to write a new book. And that can be painful and that can be overwhelming and it can feel not exciting, frankly, depending on where you are in your process. But like you get to do that because you are choosing yourself. You're choosing as a woman what you want for your life. And you're choosing big things because you're just as ambitious as me. And you know what I want to say to kind of end off today is I'm so sorry to actually, you know what? No, I'm not sorry. I'm not sorry today was emotional. But I'll be honest, I was a little bit nervous about recording today's episode because I was like, is this even going to be helpful? Is this just going to be me crying on a podcast? Like, I didn't know. But what I will say is I'm inspired by you. I help women every day um to go after their dreams and to build huge businesses and to be powerhouses at everything that they do with their health and with their life, with their faith, with their relationships, with whatever. And the thing I want to say is that you deserve it all. You deserve it all. You deserve everything that you've ever wanted and everything that you're working hard for right now. And what I needed to hear was if you're so quick to help everyone else, take a second to help yourself. You believe in everyone else around you, believe in yourself. You help everyone else around you, help yourself. You give grace to everybody around you, give grace to yourself. Because women like you listening to this are what inspire me to constantly progress forward and keep moving and taking it the next step. You inspire me to lead from the front and to realize that if I'm going to help other people, I have to help myself first. And that's what decisions and kind of what we talked about today is. And one of the mottos that really kind of tuned me into that was a question that I often ask myself. I'm not a mom yet. And I always ask myself, I say, if I had a daughter, what would I tell her? And that's helped me to make a lot of decisions. And I heard a quote actually this week that I want to share with you to end today, which is that it's actually, interestingly enough, from Jeff Bezos. And he had been talking about how he makes decisions in his life. And he said, there's the logical decisions, there's all these decisions around, the pros and cons of it and how much time you've put in and all these things. But at the end of the day, he's like, I fast forward myself to 80 and I say, would I regret not doing this? Would I regret not taking this next step? And so I want to invite you to the same question. Would you regret staying in the relationship? Would you regret leaving the relationship? Would you regret staying in the memories of all of it instead of moving forward? Right? Would you actually look back and regret it, or would you look back and say, "Hey, like I'm really proud of myself." And if you're going through a breakup or a divorce right now, or maybe you did this year, I also just want to say like, ugh, I see you and I love you and I'm really proud of you because it's not easy. And obviously, you can tell by my tears today, it's not ever really done. But I'm just so proud of you for persisting because on social media, and frankly, in a lot of connections and interactions, being real and transparent about what you're navigating is not always the topic of conversation. And if today my hope was that it would bring some validation to you of what you're experiencing, of what you're going through, of what is possible for you. And as I said, I was pretty nervous about recording today, if I'm going to be really honest with you, because I don't usually do stuff this personal. But it would mean the world to me if you're listening to this to just shoot a message and maybe just let me know, did anything land for you? Was there anything that kind of was a takeaway? Or maybe even if you just want to share your experience, I'm always here as an ear to listen. I would love to connect. And more than anything, just I appreciate you a lot, a lot. I don't really know how to finish today's episode other than to say that I appreciate you and I love you. And this is probably one of the more personal episodes that I've ever done. So I don't know how or where we'll go from here. The door has been opened, my girl. So I don't know where we'll go from here. But thank you for giving me a space and a safe space because of all of you that I connect with on social media and we chat in the DMs and stuff when you guys reach out. You have made this such a safe space for me to want to share this, and you've inspired me to share it. And I feel comfortable too because of you and who you are and being part of this ambitious community. So thank you for that. All of that to say, my friend, thank you so much for listening today. I hope today was helpful for you. I will see you next week. And as always, stay ambitious.